And I picked up that red candle and I let all of my rage out into that candle. My frustration for being alone in this, the shame for not being a better parent, the hatred that my ex had done this to me by having an affair with somebody else, the overwhelm of how all-consuming trying to rebuild while still being a mom and still working felt. Everything that I had bottled up, I let out into a scream and I chucked that candle hard against the wall. And it shattered. My son collapsed into tears, crying and screaming that his candle was broken, and I had never felt so ashamed in my life.
Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process.
Welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I'm your host, Erica, and this weekend I connected with a new listener who was right at the beginning, cleaning out the house, getting ready to sell her whole life, getting packed up in boxes. And starting this last week, her kiddo started pushing back. So she is trying to hold it all together. She is trying to wrap her head around this massive transition. Her own heart is breaking, and her kiddo is making it hard. It brought me right back to how painful this season is, the desperation, the uncertainty, the barely holding it all together for yourself and your little one. Adds more to your plate than you think you can handle. Those moments you think really will break you. Her comments took me right back. I could feel it in my body. I remembered the loneliness, how alienating it felt to not have anybody else to be able to reach out to in the moment. And today's episode is for her. And it is also for every single one of you who has been there as well. I want to say something before we get started into today's topic. If your child is acting out right now, if they're raging, they're destroying things, they're refusing to sleep, they're saying things that scare you, I need you to hear this. You are not failing. You're not alone. And this is not a reflection of who you are as a mother. This is a child whose entire world just broke open and who doesn't have the words for any of it. You're the safest place they know to fall apart, which means the falling apart is going to land on you. But here's what I want you to understand about what's happening inside your child. They've watched this family and they've believed this family was built on love. How many years have they watched you and your ex talk about, we love each other or we love this family? They believed that their family was safe and then it broke. And they don't understand how two people can just stop loving each other, which means that somewhere in their little nervous system, they are also asking, if love can just end, will your love for me end too? If dad left, will you leave? So they're not acting out to punish you. They're testing you. They don't know what to do with all the feels that are going on in their own body, and they're reaching out or raging out in hope that you'll be able to help them. They're asking you over and over and over, will you stay? Will you still be here? Will your love survive this too? And they need to know it's not about them. Even in ours, even though we knew it was not about the kiddo in the middle, I repeated that so often. They need to know their feelings are normal. They need to know that you'll sit in the muck with them instead of asking them to be okay or to be good or to stop being so difficult. And they need to know that what they feel in their body, the rage, the fear, the sadness can feel terrifying, but that you are right there and you're not going anywhere. There were really 2 seasons in my journey where my son pushed back so hard I genuinely didn't know if I could get through it. The first was when his dad moved out. After I had found out about the other woman, his dad continued to live in our shared house for a while. He moved into one of the other bedrooms, but he was still there. And I was still in a space of believing that it was all going to work out. So when I came home to find that my then husband had packed up everything of his in the house and had already moved it into an apartment without me knowing, it was soul crushing. And so I asked his dad to stay and continue to do bedtimes. Because again, I really did believe that this was going to be okay, that we were going to get through it. And so I didn't want my son to know what was really happening. So for a while, his dad stayed, and the two of us would do our normal bedtime routine and say goodnight and put him to bed. And then his dad would hang out on the couch for a little bit until we felt like he had fallen asleep or, yes, he had settled down. Then his dad would leave and go to his own apartment. Obviously, this was not a long term solution. And eventually we shared what was happening. His dad was saying that this is just not something that can continue. We've got to be able to tell him. I will confess that I don't remember how we told him. There are still moments, pieces in my memories that are locked away or forgotten or ignored because they were just too painful to deal with. But I do know that once we told him that bedtimes became a 2-hour battle, refusing to stay in bed, constantly coming out, power struggles to the nth degree. It became things like he wouldn't stay in bed. I'd turn the lights off. He'd turn the lights on. He'd come out to the living room. I'd walk him back to the bedroom. Eventually, it got to a place where, I was holding the door closed, like, Bubba, you need to stop. It's time to go to bed. And I needed him to go to bed because I needed that time for me. I had spent all day pretending everything was fine. I had spent all day managing the anxiety, the worry, the desperation that my world was falling apart. And the only time I could really completely let go and fall apart was when nobody else needed me. So I needed my son to go to bed, which created a push on my side that it had to happen, and it had to happen now. And we can't delay this any longer. There was a moment in the original house that I just remember these nights where, he wouldn't stay in bed. And eventually I'm sitting on the floor outside of his door, telling him it's time to go to bed. He needs to get back in bed. I'm here, but it's bedtime, holding the door closed. And he's on the other side trying to open the door. And both of us, he's yelling, I'm crying. We are mirroring each other's pain, mirroring each other's uncertainty. What is going on? Why does this have to be different? And what I wish I had known then was that it was less important about maintaining the rules and more important about just being present. I thought the best way to be able to get through this was to maintain a consistent bedtime routine, to maintain a consistent time that you needed to go to bed. It had been fine. He was 4 at this point, moving on to 5. Why was this coming up now? I wish that I had been able to let it be, to allow it to unfold the way that it was, maybe sit in there longer, maybe just lay in there, maybe fall asleep in there. And he was fighting, he was angry, and he was not able to accept any of that. It just created a bigger power struggle for us and some really long, sad nights. Now, the second time was when we moved. So when we finally sold the house and moved into our townhouse, we had another rumble through rough bedtimes. He was older now, 2 years older. He was now moving 6 into 7, which meant that the sadness or the fear or the uncertainty had grown into something bigger. It was anger. It was rage. It was frustration. We'd have good days. He went to his dad 2 days a week. We'd have good, normal routines, relatively well going to bed, some normal pushback, right? He didn't want to get off Fortnite or stop playing whatever game he was playing at that age. But we made it through those. Those were fine. Those were normal. But the nights that he came back from dad's, and thank God the 2 days were together. So there was one transition night a week, all hell would break loose. We're talking about ripping up books, dumping baskets of clothes down the stairs, a tornado of destruction through the living room where he tossed every single pillow, cushion, blanket, anything he could find. At first, I used to call his dad and I used to say, hey, can you talk to him? Because at this point, my son still listened better to his dad, pushed back less to his dad than he did to me. And I'd put him on the phone with his dad. And in the beginning, that worked. Hey, Bubba, you got to calm down. It's bedtime. I'll talk to you in the morning. And my kiddo would go to bed. Well, eventually it didn't work. And my frustration got more. And I was calling now to tell his dad that you must be the problem. You must be the problem because this only happens on transition nights. We are fine. Well, as you can imagine, eventually his dad's patience ran out on that too. And that was the night that his dad said, you know what? You're the problem because he doesn't do this when he's here. So it's your parenting. You figure it out. There was a click, and that was the last call that I ever made to try and get help on putting our kid to bed. Now Now I was truly alone in it. And as you know, anytime there's a power struggle, what helps? If somebody can intervene, if a third party can step in and redirect, that helps so much. But now it really was just me and my son. The hitting started. He was older. The hitting, the kicking, the biting, anything to try and get this rage out. So instead of me trying to keep him in his room, I would remove myself. I would put myself in my bedroom. He'd bang on the door. He'd yell. He'd kick the door. He was desperate for the connection, but when we were close, there was so much going on in his body that he would react. And all I could do was continue to repeat, love you. You're okay, but you cannot hurt other people. This pattern, this spiral, this momentum, it continued for months. It would get bigger. I would feel even more alone. I'd feel absolutely helpless and trying to figure it out. He would hit this spiral. It'd start little, it'd intensify. He'd go as far as to say, I'm dumb. Everybody hates me at school. I shouldn't even be here anymore. And how terrifying is it to hear those words from your child? This is also a space that I want to say there are seasons when we need more help. I knew that at this point, we needed more help because how I was trying to reach my son, it wasn't fixing the problem. Sometimes it was helping, but it wasn't helping consistently. And I could still see that the pattern was getting more and more intense. So I did find a therapist who works with kids, which is really hard. It should not be so hard, but it is hard to find a child focused therapist. And we went not because I felt like I was failing, but because I wanted more tools. I wanted more tools. I wanted to understand what was happening with my son. I wanted to understand what I could do differently. And I wanted my son to have a trusted adult he could talk to because in divorce, sometimes they just don't want to talk to their mom or to their dad. Doesn't mean you're failing. It means that you need other trusted adults that you know are going to steer them in the right direction. And for me, that was about finding the right therapist. So we found a therapist. What she helped me understand changed how I showed up. She helped me see that when my son pushed me away, when he hit and kicked and told me to leave, how I locked myself in my bedroom, what he actually needed me to do was stay. And she said, so that even though everything about him is telling you to get away from me, what he actually wants to know is you're not going to leave him. He needs to know that you're not going to go. So I changed my language. I shifted into, I'm not going to leave you, but you cannot hurt people. And I already saw a shift in his behavior. She also worked with him directly, giving him tools to regulate his own system. Things like a cold sip of water. Did you know that when you're getting heated, when you're getting triggered, intense, a cold sip of water redirects where that blood flow goes and helps to shift us out of that reptilian survival brain, the one that wants to fight. We move out of that. She helped him understand what was happening in his body when the rage took over, because just think about it, as a small child, all of a sudden, all these feelings just come up. It can be really scary and you don't know what's going on and you don't know how to control it. I mean, Hulk is a prime example of what it's like. Imagine your child is just morphed into Hulk, and how do we help get him back? Because he didn't know it either. He just knew something was off. Something felt unbearable. Something felt wrong, and it was all coming out. So when you need the tool, when you need the support, find the person that can help you through it. And then there is one moment that I will try and get through without crying because it is still raw. And the reason I'm sharing it is because when we leave things in hiding, when we refuse to talk about the moments that are really hard, the shame and the guilt can build. And recently this summer, actually, I don't know if it was before or after my son was on the podcast, I asked if he remembered the night of the red candle. And he did not, as I shared what happened on the night of the red candle with him, as I confessed how terrible I felt, how this moment in time has still continued to haunt me all these years. He, in his loving way, has turned it into a humorous situation, bringing it up, asking if I've told people about the red candle. So today I am telling all of you, and this is how we do the healing work in community and with support. So here we go. My son had this tiny little red candle. It actually was one of those pillars. It was an electric candle, and he used to use it as a nightlight. So it was his comfort. It was something he could control. He could turn it on. He could turn it off. It was always there. Now, one really terrible night, he continued to not stay in bed. I was 100% past my breaking point. I had already removed all the other toys. If you aren't listening, your stuffed animals are going to be packed away for a day or whatever it is. The punishments had already been given. The ultimatums had already been given, and nothing was working. I was yelling, I was crying. I had completely lost it that night. And I picked up that red candle and I let all of my rage out into that candle. My frustration for being alone in this, the shame for not being a better parent, the hatred that my ex had done this to me by having an affair with somebody else, the overwhelm of how all consuming trying to rebuild while still being a mom and still working felt. And so all that rage, everything that I had bottled up, I let out into a scream and I chucked that candle hard against the wall and it shattered. My son collapsed into tears, crying and screaming that his candle was broken, and I had never felt so ashamed in my life. We both ended up on the floor sobbing, holding each other, rocking back and forth, and in that moment, I was certain I was a failure, that I had broken my child because I couldn't hold it together. The shame, the guilt, the pain, it was a gut punch I had never experienced before in my life, and I was certain it meant I was failing, that I was a horrendous mom, that I shouldn't be a mom anymore because what kind of mom does this? My therapist told me something that changed everything. I took this story to him. I took these moments of shame to him as a safe space. And he said, parenting isn't about being perfect. It's about repairing when you make a mistake. I had this belief that good moms put their kids first and good moms don't lose their shit and good moms were better than me. And he changed all that. He told me good moms care, good moms try, good moms own when they make a mistake and they work hard not to repeat it. He said the fact that I was upset about it, that I was here on his couch talking about it, that I wanted to do better, meant that I wasn't a bad mom. So now I want to ask you, do you hear that? When I tell you the fact that you're listening to this episode, that you want to do better, that you care, that proves that you're a good mom. You're just in a hard place, a hard season, and you're trying to figure out things that you had never planned for. You are a good mom. Just let that sink in for a second. You're a good mom. Does it make you tear up when you hear that? It did for me. When somebody would see me struggling and would tell me that I was a good mom, I couldn't take it. It felt so far from the truth, like I was an imposter. But now I know they saw what I couldn't. So I'm here to tell you I see what you can't. This is a season. It is a terribly hard and painful one, but it will pass and you will find your way through. And your kids are going to be okay. How do I know that? Because my therapist also shared that it isn't one moment that hurts a child. It's a repeated pattern. One broken candle does not break a child, but what you do next matters. And it was that one piece of information that saved me, that gave me a lifeline to understand that I am not a horrendous mom. I'm just in a really horrendous place. And that as long as I continued to try and work on myself and how I showed up, as long as I owned the places that I wasn't the mom I wanted to be, I would apologize often, like, hey, kiddo, I yelled and that wasn't about you. That was about me. I had too much on my plate. And I'm sorry that I did that because that wasn't fair to you. That behavior is what I leaned on because I couldn't be perfect. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to figure it out alone. And I had massive internal emotional ruptures going on. So I leaned on the pieces I could control. I could sit in the muck with him. I could share that I'm not leaving. We don't have to talk about it right now, but I'm not going anywhere. I could own my mistakes and I could work really hard on showing up differently. Now, these moments, I had one friend I used to call. She's been on the podcast. You know who you are. Thank you for always answering. But I would call and she would sit on the phone with me and I would spiral into my own insecurities and into my own worries. And even though she was there on some of those nights, this was a season where I felt completely alone. Because when you're stuck in a power struggle with your child, when there's nobody else to step in, when you have no idea how to break the pattern, and nobody else understands in real time because nobody's in your house, in this room having to deal with it, it feels so isolated. And the isolation of it, when no one in your circle is living it, when nobody understands it, only makes it feel that much more intense and that much more powerful in the story of you must be doing something wrong. So I know that if you're sitting in this, that you are suffering in silence. And what I know you need is a place where other women can say, yes, oh my God, me too. I was there and here's what helped. That's what the club was built for. Not to vent, This is not a space where we show up and we bitch about the stuff that's going on. We show up and we share what we're struggling with and we find a way forward together. So if you're in that season, I want you to go check out the club. I want you to put yourself in a room with women who get it, because it is the number one thing that will shift from you feeling completely alone and uncertain and am I doing this right? And oh my God, I don't want to ruin my kids and I don't know how I'll ever get my life back on track, to understanding that you are experiencing exactly what happens when we go through divorce. And the room is full of women who have been there and can share how they got through it and can share how things have changed for them. The link to learn more is down below in the show notes. You can also head over to thecrazyexwivesclub.com under support and check out what we have to offer. We meet live every single week. There's always a room for you to show up in. There's always a space where there are people willing to help. So let me give you some practical tools to take into this week. First, even when your child tells you to leave, he doesn't actually want you to leave. The hitting, the kicking, the pushing you away, that is him asking if you'll stay anyways. I shifted my language. I started repeating, I will not leave you, over and over. I'm here with you. You're not alone. We don't have to talk about it, but I will not leave you. I want you to start using that language and see what happens, especially that we don't have to talk about it, but let me just sit with you in the muck. I will not leave you in the muck. The second, name what they're feeling. So start to give them words, because as a young kid, they don't have them yet. Their nervous system knows something feels wrong, but the kiddo can't name it. So you name it for him. You're angry. You're sad that you have two houses. You're missing your dad. It is hard to go between two houses. You're scared. You're not asking them to fix it. You're not asking them to change it. You're not asking them to stop so that your night goes easier. You are showing him or her that their feelings have a name and that you can hold them together. Because when we finally name it, when we start to peel those layers back, like, hey, you don't like having two houses, I guarantee what comes out of them is some statement back. Yeah, well, it really sucks that you guys both can't be here. So you're missing your dad. Yeah, well, he's not here when I want him to be here. We can get to the root of it, because when we get to the root of it, you're missing your dad. Let's set up more time for you to talk to him when you're here at mom's house. Transitions are hard. Two houses are freaking hard. So your job is to help your child name what is happening to them. When we name it, we can start to let it go. All right, the third tip, just know that those transition days, they are their own category. The nights he came home from his dad's were always the hardest. And once I understood that, I stopped being blindsided by it. I stopped blaming it. I accepted it and said, these nights are different. I built in extra softness on those nights, extra connection, less tech, lower expectations, more grace. We didn't do battles over homework. We didn't do battles over screens. We gave lots of prep, lots of awareness. We slowed down the time it took to transition from coming home into like evening TV or tech, into reading books, into bed. Everything slowed down. We did not rush through the process. Fourth, and this one's going to feel counterintuitive, you do not have to hold every rule perfectly right now. I started letting my son sleep in my bed, and that was the thing that shifted everything. Now, rest assured, my son does not still sleep in my bed, so they all grow out of it. But in the moment, what was making the night harder is I had created a story that to be a good mom, I needed to maintain the consistency. So the time had to stay on track. The flow had to stay on track. We had to enforce the rules of what it means to have a good bedtime. And when I stopped enforcing the rules and stayed present in the moment, we shifted the dynamic. So a lot of the issues that were happening happened in the separation times. The point that my son had to go to bed and I went downstairs. The point that my son had to go to school and I went to work. When we reached points where we were about to go separate ways, everything got stirred up. So as a short-term solution, I shifted and I put him to bed in my bed, and then would carry him back to his own bed in the middle of the night. This allowed his nervous system to relax. It allowed him to know that I was present and I was there. It helped him feel safe. And when he felt safe, night times began to flow again. Just repeat in your head, this is a season, not a life sentence. We can make choices that make the short term easier and then work towards finding a long-term solution. Fifth, I reminded myself constantly, growth can feel hard when we fight it. It was a mantra that I lived by every time something hurt. I reminded myself that I was being asked to grow, to evolve, to change, to see something different. And growth only hurts when we resist it. Every time it felt impossible, I said, "Oh, you're being asked to grow." I would use that to help me shift from trying to force and control. I would use it to shift from a victim mode of, "Oh, why is this so hard? Why is this happening to me?" to instead saying, "Oh, this is asking me to grow. And when I figure out what this lesson is, I will have mastered it and I will move on." I leaned in instead of fighting it so that I could find my own way through. What eventually shifted was that I stopped trying to enforce a perfect bedtime. I started creating a system of balance and respect, not a rigid set of rules that demanded he listen. I looked for the feeling. I wanted to create a safe house where we are present and respected. We're on the same team. We're in the muck together. Like, hey, I will sit with you because we all know how absolutely terrifying it feels to sit in the muck alone. You're doing it right now. Your kid's doing it too. It is safe to tell your kid that this is hard for both of you. It is safe to tell your kid, you know what? This is difficult and we're going to figure it out together. I stopped putting myself on one side and him on the other, and I put myself next to him. And that changed everything. If you are in this season right now, I want you to hear me. The snapshots of your worst moment are not the story of who you are as a mother. And the overarching story is a woman who showed up every single day in one of the hardest seasons of her life, who kept trying, who kept loving, who kept coming back, even when she broke a candle against the wall and sobbed on the floor next to her kid. This is not failure. This is real life. And that's a mother doing the hardest thing that she never wanted to do. You are not alone in it. That is what we stand for here at the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. And if you're craving that place to come back to every single month, head over to thecrazyexwivesclub.com, click on support. You have two options for monthly support. The Wild Woman, that is a container where you lead yourself through. You get prompts and you get a video from me. And then there is the club where we meet live in community, in support, in sisterhood. You have tools. You are not alone in this. And when you're ready, I'm here to help you through it. Until next time, give yourself some grace. Motherhood is hard. Motherhood through divorce seems near impossible, but every divorced mom I've talked to will confirm you will get through this and you will be able to look back and understand why it happened exactly the way it did.
And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.